You know what I'm saying? Maybe I read a book, or maybe I thought about something. Maybe I said, I'll try doing something nice, or But then excessive thinking is just so toxic. You know what I'm saying? And excessive thinking is just, I think, a particular variety of wrong thinking. So there's like one type of wrong thinking where I think a disturbing thought, and then it doesn't spiral into additional thinking. I just am left with the afterburn of that disturbing thought, or I get so discouraged I just drop the topic totally. You know what I'm saying? But overthinking is just a special iteration of wrong thinking, where basically what happens is you think something not useful in a way that snowballs into thinking something else that's not useful, and then something else that isn't useful, and on and on and on. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then very quickly it's I don't know, it's a strange thing when you're stuck in a loop, and it's almost like you think that you've got to run through the loop one more time and then maybe you'll get out. But every pass that you make, and it reminds me of a really funny story that my dad told me about when Douglas came to live with him. He would do this thing where he would pace around this tree in the front yard, and the way my dad told the story, and I mean, I don't think there was a ton of exaggeration here, was that the guy paced so much that he literally kind of wore a trench around this tree. Like he just with his foot traffic, he paced with such vigor and persistence that he actually created a circular trench. I don't know if there's another word for it, but you know what I'm saying, around the tree. And I feel like that's what these kind of unresourceful thought patterns are like. It's kind of like, I've got to get out of this. I got to think this through one more time. But you think it through the same old way. So one, you're thinking about it incorrectly or unresourcefully. And then two, you're thinking about it unresourcefully in a way that results in you continuing to think about it unresourcefully and starting that process over and over again. It's like a hamster who thinks that, he'll get rid of the hamster wheel if he just runs on it enough. Do you know what I'm saying? And then I think the thing is, there's almost certainly too much effort to begin with, because how'd you get on the wrong thinking path? That may have even been an auspicious beginning where the thinking could have been right thinking, but there was too much effort involved. That knocked you into wrong thinking, and it was self-perpetuating wrong thinking. You see what I mean? And then the interest, so it was an excess of effort that got you there in the first place. You're probably pretty smart. I mean, most people are pretty smart. You know what I'm saying? They're capable. They're smart enough to get what they want, and that's the only thing that matters as far as I can tell. There are people who feel bad about not being smarter than they are. You know what I mean? It's like, well, you might be pretty smart, and even if you're not, I'm sure you're smart enough to get the things you want, right? So at that point, what difference does it make?
Right.
But that intelligence is ruined or compromised because of a surplus of effort, So you've got, sufficient tomatoes in your soup, and they're good quality, and you got enough of them. Here's your intelligence. And then effort is salt, and you dump the whole fucking container in. You've messed up perfectly good tomatoes. You know what I mean? Now, the interesting thing is that for a lot of people, their solution to being stuck in a self-perpetuating pattern of wrong thinking that they got into probably as a result of excessive effort, their solution is to add additional effort to that pattern of wrong thinking. Let me think about it harder. Let me think about it more intensely. Let me add more emotion to it. Let me try harder to not think the unresourceful thing that I'm only thinking because at some point I slipped into trying too hard. You know what I mean? Which is kind of interesting. So, the effort not only isn't going to fix wrong thinking, the effort probably caused wrong thinking in the first place. You know what I'm saying? And so, how lightly can you think about it? I mean, it's so interesting. It reminds me of when we first kind of were hanging out and stuff, and it suddenly became necessary for me to share with you, to some extent, my creative process or my intentions. I would muse to you and say, I'm intending to start doing this exercise or start studying more or whatever, And it used to be that I could just tell you that, and then it was just none of your business. You didn't know whether I did it, you know what I mean? Like, you weren't there. But when we started living together, all of a sudden, you sort of, if you didn't see what you thought it looked like for me to be doing what I said I was going to to do, you begin wondering about it.
Yeah.
Remember when I would be like, da, 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 you know?
Yeah.
You remember that? You're gonna, like, I don't, you can't talk about it. It's like there's a seed you plant in the ground, and if you talk about it, or if you make me think about it, when it doesn't spring in, it can't spring into my mind on its own if you force me to think about it by bringing it up. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And that was a really interesting, and that was, I think, one of the interesting things that we had in terms of one of our first kind of maybe compatibility issues, and it was pretty superficial, but it was still there, was that you were in the mode of like resolutions,
Yeah.
war planning, and by Christ, starting this Monday, hell or high water. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And that for me, just I never liked it because one, it wasn't necessary, and two, I found it wasn't effective. I found that it was better for me just to sprinkle the idea into my mind. I've been contemplating starting this thing, and to underthink it rather than overthink it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
To under effort it. I haven't put enough effort in. It's like our business, you know. I think we have under efforted in certain areas of our business, but we're so much better off than we would have been had we over efforted.
Yes. I think that's the only way that we've gotten to this point, though, is to be so chill about it, you know?
Yeah, right. And I think it's one of those things too that you can then begin, because you can always add more salt. It's hard to take it away.
It's hard to take it away. Amen.
But and the other thing too is that you really begin to get a sense for what specifically is needed. You know, and that's like, as we were talking to those people today, it's like, you know, they just said something, they just mentioned an herb, and it's like, you know what, that needs to go in our business soup. You know, that's a good one. That's, you know what I'm saying? I knew that herb existed before you mentioned it, and I knew that I was looking for herbs to improve the taste of my business soup. You know what I mean? But for some reason, it took you mentioning that herb in order for me to go, that's it, you know? Now, how little effort can I think, you know, it's going to become irresistible for me to do that thing now, rather than it being like a list of 10 things that I have to do before I can even begin to consider feeling okay about our business. You know, it's this thing is going to sit, and it's going to become more appealing to me until I literally cannot resist the urge to act upon the idea. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
And I think that's the way to do it. Now, you know, and so what if it takes an extra couple of weeks? I mean, what if it takes a couple of weeks longer than it would have taken had I, you know, really forced myself or something? This is funny. See this guy here, he's not paying attention to what's going on because he's filming